Welcome back, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Slayer and Andy show, the show where we talk about precious metals, more specifically silver. And if you want some of that shiny stuff, you know where to go. Andy Sheckman is the CEO of Miles Franklin, the most respected precious metals company. Never had a negative review in 45 years. Sometimes we mess up, but most important part is he'll make it right. He'll fix it. That's what's important. So, Andy, yeah, what's up? You want to talk about anything, catch up on anything? How things been going?
Yeah, buddy, it's good to see you, man. Good to see you. The world is spinning really quickly. It seems to be spinning faster and faster and faster every day. One thing I'd like to mention about today's discussion, while we will talk certainly about silver, I think there's a lot of topics surrounding gold right now that we need to
Mm,
discuss. And if you go back to the beginning of time and you draw a line or a graph that represents 5,000 years worth of time, you will see a relationship between the two. I mean, for the majority of that time was 16 to 1, right? That
yeah.
was not only the geological ratio, but also the price ratio. And yes, when we hit the Industrial Revolution, the price ratio changed. The geologic ratio didn't until now, when the geologic ratio has actually been over halved to 7 to 1. But the moral of the story is that while they don't move in perfect symmetry all the time with one another, as one goes, ultimately so does the other. Sometimes gold will lead the way and silver will outperform it after its slingshots. And sometimes it's the other way around, where silver leads the way and then gold catches up. So there are factors and variables that will accentuate one metal over the other. But when I say the word gold, I mean silver too. And it is impossible in my mind to think of one without the other. And so there are some things that happen as it pertains to gold that are worth talking about. Certainly some things happening with Saudi Arabia worth talking about. And so, yeah, I mean, we can just dig right in. A couple of the big things that happened over the last few days. One is, about a week or two ago, there was a report that came out about this ESG, which stands for Environmental Social Governance. And basically, what it was talking about was the ERISA laws, which dictated that uh, a fiduciary, call it a pension fund administrator, a large hedge fund administrator, 401k administrator, that these folks had to act in the best interest of the client. They had to act in our best interest if they're managing our money. And this new rule, which was passed, says, well, they don't have to do that anymore if some of the investments don't mesh with environmental or social governance. Like, for example, there's not enough minorities or women on a board, or maybe a company feels that it's in poor taste to invest in things like Philip Morris tobacco or in alcohol, or whatever it may be, whatever the reason, the woke reasons would be. This new law basically says, well, now the administrator does not need to act in your best interest, but in the best interest of the company, if indeed these things that we're investing in butt heads with this ESG, environmental, social, woke agenda. And look, I'm a kind of guy that my parents were hippies. All right. I grew up in a house, very liberally social environment. Um, I started a business when I was 19 with my father from a wing and a prayer. And we scraped and we worked hard, and we are both very fiscally conservative, socially liberal. I don't care what you want to do with yourself behind closed doors. That's your business. But
Right.
to me, that makes me a libertarian. But I think as it pertains to finances of the country or of my own household, I prefer a very conservative approach. As it pertains to lifestyle, hey, more power to you. You know, whatever you want to do, that's how I look at the world. And so when we talk about these woke agendas, I find them very distasteful in that they are taking precedent over something more important, like the outcome of the investment, or just bending the rules of what made this country great to fit a very liberal woke agenda. I think, you know, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too far, but simply speaking, I think there are times and places where it's okay to be liberal when you're talking about lifestyle. There are times and places when that's not appropriate. I'll just leave it at that. But anyway, so one thing that, you know, one of the ESG problems would be with things, natural resources would be the harm to the environment, right? And so that's kind of like this natural gas crap, where, you know, natural gas is clean and clean burning energy, and now all of a sudden it's as bad as coal. I mean, that's just pure crap, right? Well, I was worried about how ESG would look at mining metals. And it's interesting, there was a report that just came out a couple of days ago from Bank of America. And the article is titled, Bank of America Lays Out the Case for Gold Being a Green Metal. And in that report, you know, you got the woke banks like Bank of America and others who are framing gold as an ESG positive metal, right? So for this to happen, it tells me that there is a real push behind the scenes that gold needs to be part of asset portfolios again, and that the powers that be understand that there cannot be a world right now without gold as part of the calculus.
Yeah.
And they're making it acceptable to own. And this is a big deal. I think they are making it understood that it's okay to have gold in a portfolio. And I think gold will be very significant in the system that arises from the broken system that we find ourselves limping to the finish line in now. I think the Keynesian debt-laden system that we have been subservient to for a long time is coming to its last stages of existence. And I don't think people will drink the Kool-Aid again unless gold is part of it. And so now when you realize that gold is green, and it's okay for the massive investment funds and hedge funds to own gold in their portfolios without upsetting the greenies, their woke shareholders. And I think the bottom line is, if gold is green, what does that mean for silver? Same thing. And it's a big turnaround as far as I'm concerned. It sets the table for much more broad acceptance in the Western culture for gold. And I think the message is own gold, as does the author. And I think it's very much worth talking about because it just seems that these woke agendas are permeating their way into so much of our lives, and so much of it is just a head scratcher, where, you know, a biological male can dominate. He can identify as a woman and dominate the NCAA swimming competition for women. It's just wrong, right? So it's wrong. And so these woke agendas that are becoming commonplace and accepted, I was worried about the way that they would look at gold and silver. And, you know, you can argue it's almost hypocritical, because there are ecological shortfalls with mining and leach pits and all of this stuff. But bottom line is, I think the world realizes that we need gold. And so they are calling it a green metal. And that's very, very bullish, I think, ultimately for gold and silver. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk about, you know, I've spent a lot of time over the last few years talking about this progression of events where the BRICS nations are moving away from the West. They're formulating alliances all over the place. And there's this meeting going on right now in Davos, Switzerland, the World Economic Forum. Saudi Arabia, this was in Bloomberg as of this morning, and I'm just going to read a little bit. It says Saudi Arabia is open to discussions about trade in currencies other than the US dollar, according to the kingdom's finance minister, Bloomberg reported on Tuesday. This is a big deal, right? Because what has made the dollar the world reserve currency is its acceptance as the main settlement currency for oil. 85% of all the oil settlement in the world is settled in dollars. So every country on the planet nearly has had to own dollars for the last 50 years to buy oil. And now Saudi Arabia is saying, hey, we're open to taking other currencies. This is the beginning of the end of the dollar as we know it. It is the beginning of the end of the petrodollar system as we know it. This is a massive deal. Now, this is going to be before they make the announcement of the United BRICS currency, which we've already been told is coming and it will be pegged to commodities. I believe this is a push towards the petro yuan. The renminbi and the petro yuan are right now stealing a lot of the settlement from the dollar, whether it be with Saudi Arabia and Nigeria or Russia. Other countries, Iran, are selling their oil to China either for the petro yuan bond or the renminbi, both of which are immediately convertible into precious metals on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. This is exactly how they sidestep sanctions. But what it is you have a country here, the US, who has told Saudi Arabia that within the next 10 years, we're not going to need any of your oil. We're going completely green. So why would they want to hitch their wagon to us? Instead, a country like China and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Belt Road Initiative and the BRICS nations comprise north of 85% of human population who are not abandoning fossil fuels or combustion engines. It's a natural progression that will happen undoubtedly. And as you see little pieces, you got all these countries that are making their own CBDC. And all of these countries are now going to trade amongst themselves using the M bridge that China and I think Singapore and the United Arab Emirates developed. The M bridge is the cross-border central bank digital currency payment system that allows cross-border transactions not using the SWIFT system. These pieces are being put in place before, bang, they say the BRICS currency is ready, here we go. And at that point, the fuse is lit and the dollar's days are over as world reserve, because you will have currencies and relationships, or a currency and relationships that are centered around commodities and real things and transparency, probably showing it all on a distributed ledger, that being the rails of the Chinese digital yuan, instead of a system like ours, which is anything but transparent and straightforward and is based upon debt and debt instruments. And it's just a system that has run its course. So I think this is a massive deal that now is being thrown out into the public, rather than someone like myself talking about it for the almost 3 years now when no one really has heard about it. And I guess the bottom line is the petrodollar as we once knew it is dying right before our eyes. It is happening right here. Some would argue it's already died, like my friend Chris Irons, and who's a fantastic writer, and the title of an article he just wrote is the petrodollar is dead. So I just think that this is something people need to pay attention to. When you see this broadcast at the World Economic Forum and Bloomberg picks it up, it's a big deal. When you see these green woke agendas driving the way that we live our life here in the United States, and now gold is being called a green metal by the Bank of America and other banks, it is a very big deal. So those are the two things right now that jump off the page to me. I think there's one other thing I'll mention, gold related and silver related. So one of the things that I've talked about a lot with you and with others is the ability for big banks and hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, to suppress the price of gold. And it's easy for me to say that. And I thought about it and I thought, it's easy for me to say this, but are people really understanding what I'm saying? So I asked our trader, our head trader, who hedges all of our positions, how much money does it cost? What is involved in securing a 100-ounce gold contract? And he said to me last week that a 100-ounce gold futures contract controlled at the time $188,000 worth of gold. Okay. And in order to buy a contract or sell a contract, either go long or short, all we needed in our margin account was $6,900. Now that $6,900 doesn't go to buy the contract; it's in our margin account. And so if the price goes up, we don't have any problem. If it goes down, we need to add more money to our margin account. Imagine if you're a bank like Bank of America and you put $1 billion in your margin account. Look at the perception of reality that you can create with a contract that has 27 times leverage. 27 times leverage right now is what you are able to control. Every dollar that you put into a COMEX contract controls $27 worth of gold. This is how they suppress the paper price and at the same time accumulate the physical. Let me show you what I mean by that. Last week alone, on January 11th, in one day, one trader bought 1,223 gold contracts at spot. Contracts of spot gold, they're called. And what that means within a delivery month is that they're buying them immediately for delivery. 1,223 contracts times 100 ounces of gold is $230 million. Who's got that kind of bread? Few days later, on Monday, which would have been maybe the 16th, I think, $96 million worth of gold were bought on another 505 contracts at spot. So you have, in essence, $320 million worth of gold was bought for, paid for, and delivered off the exchange. Wow. Who's got that bread? So if you look at the total amount of physical gold and silver held in all of the depositories, the ETFs and the mutual funds, as the close of business last Friday, in 1 week, coming out of all of these ETFs and exchanges, 553,000 ounces of gold were removed and 9,489,000 ounces of silver were taken out as well. Taken out, removed off the exchanges. Where's it going? Do you think there's any coincidence that a country like India imported 300 million ounces? Do you think there's any coincidence that China has admitted to buying 100 metric tons over the last 3 months? Where's it all going? It's going that way. And when it leaves these exchanges, it ain't ever coming back.
Right.
So those are the three things that I wanted to mention, because price isn't always what it seems. Behind the scenes, you got some of the biggest banks in the world saying gold is good. You got Saudi Arabia saying, we're going to take other currencies other than the dollar, which is has massive ramifications for everything valued in dollars. And at the same time, as it's really muted and quiet on the gold and silver front to the public, one trader has enough bread to take $320 million worth of gold off of the COMEX market like that. What does it mean? It means that price is not really, it's the greatest tool of misdirection, as we talk about. And there's a whole lot more to the story than you will gather from just looking at the cover of the book. So those would be the really pressing things. And we could talk about Janet Yellen saying we have to do extraordinary things to keep the government going, which is a sad state of affairs. We could talk about the FDIC, which is really interesting also. Let's remind me to talk about the FDIC after I'll let you speak, because you're sitting there so patiently and quietly. But I will say this, that even on weeks where not a lot happens, a lot happens. In the years before, I mean, stuff like this would happen once every 6 months. Right. And now they're happening once every 6 seconds. So a lot to talk about, a lot going on. And I think it's going to be emblematic of what we see moving forward this year.
Yeah. I actually just sent David Morgan this article, scientists coming out and saying, urging the public that we have to cut back on silver. We don't have enough. And they went into the numbers, and stuff like that would come out, like you said, once every 6 months. And now every single day you hear a mining company, or I think it was like investing.com or they're all coming out and saying, silver, we need it so much, and how critical, this crucial role that it plays. And it's like, this is something that would never happen a couple of years ago. I was making daily videos about it, but I feel like now people are finally getting the picture, the full picture, the aftermath, and even with investors, the aftermath. Yeah, we get a pretty penny, but at what cost? But reverting back to gold, I always called silver gold on steroids, right?
I
It's a
agree.
more dramatic version, higher highs and lower lows. It's riskier, but gold is still a great invest. You can fit $100,000 worth of gold in a shoebox. You can't do that with silver. There's definitely a lot of benefits to gold, and I think gold is a direction you go more for preserving your wealth. And if you are someone that is more opportunistic, silver does come in play. I don't really, I'm not one to say, gold is bad, or that you should always buy silver over gold. I own gold. One, actually, my biggest goals this year is to accumulate more gold. And before, it was strictly silver. So, when I'm talking to people, they always ask, what is the ratio? Is it every 100 ounces of silver, 1 ounce of gold? It really doesn't matter, whatever you prefer, but I definitely think gold has its place, especially if you are someone who's putting money into this. 100,000 ounces or $100,000 worth of silver is a lot of storage space.
Yeah, well, you could put $100,000 worth of gold in your two front hands. You're talking
Right,
50 ounces of gold, 52
right.
ounces. They come in tubes of 20. One tube and one tube here is almost 80 grand. So you have two tubes in each hand. You got 150,
Yeah,
160,000 in your hand. The equivalent in silver, you're talking roughly 15 mint boxes at 42
right.
pounds each. So you're talking, a lot of weight, six, seven
Yeah,
hundred pounds for the same amount that you can hold in your hands. And it is gold on steroids. And I think
yeah,
there is an awful lot to be said for silver. And when you talk about supply, the London Metals Exchange just came out and said if we see the type of demand and deliveries that we saw in 2020 through 2022, there won't be any silver left on the LME in 2023. So the stock, according to the article that you're talking about, and the U.S. Geological Survey Group, it's a branch of the U.S. government, a few years ago came out and said silver would be the first item struck from the periodic table of elements. There
yep.
was another article I saw just the other day that said that by the year 2000 and I want to say 2050, that
The
just
next,
the solar panels alone would take all of the silver known to exist. And so when you talk about a depleted asset, which for 5,000 years had a geological ratio of 16 to 1, and it's now 7 to 1, and expansion in uses, um, not just monetarily, of course, but industrially. Yeah, silver is a depleted asset. And maybe this is why they've gone to such great lengths to mute the price rise. And at the same time, that is being betrayed by the drawdowns in physical supply. I want to hammer this home. I've talked about it on a few interviews lately. I want people to understand that buying contracts and taking delivery, whether it be from the LME or the COMEX, is wholly sophisticated. It's not like calling me up or another company and buying metal here retail. To take possession of a COMEX contract, to take delivery of it, not only is it difficult to do, but where do you put it? Where do you put 1,000 ounce silver bars? And when the amount of, that's just one contract, when you see, millions of ounces being delivered, where's it going? It loses all of its industrial liquidity once it leaves the COMEX ecosystem. So once it's shipped out, it ain't ever coming back. It's a
right,
one-way street. The people that are able to take delivery are very sophisticated, very wealthy, and probably closest to the information. In other words, on one hand, the price says, keep going, it's crap. Who wants it? On the other hand, the most sophisticated, think about that, sophisticated and well-funded people in the world are draining the supply from the most difficult places to pull it from. Right? It's one thing if you're a Keith Neumeyer and you're the CEO of First Majestic, taking things in and out of COMEX probably is no big deal. It's another thing if you're an average Joe or Jane. Good luck trying to do that.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And so you're talking people that are high up on the sophistication level, high up on the information level, and very, very wealthy.
Yeah.
So that should tell you these are the people that always lead the way.
Jim
Always.
Rogers, for one. Jim
Yes.
Rogers been coming out a lot lately.
They all
Yeah.
lead the way. So that's one of the things that I hope people understand. And it's difficult when your eyes lie to you.
Yeah.
When your eyes lie to you, but your gut tells you something else. And it's hard to reconcile that. But I think your eyes are lying to you when you look at the price, unless you dig and look at what's coming off of the exchanges. If price was an indication of value, then who's buying all of the big bars? Who's taking possession of all of this? And when you realize that they're being bled down to levels that no one's really ever seen before, and yet you and I and the people who listen to this show are the pimple on the elephant's ass in terms of understanding of what's happening. What happens when everyone understands it? Realizing that there's virtually no allocation to the mainstream in metals. And yet, when you take a look objectively at silver, objectively, right? Suspend the fact that I own a metals company. It's depleting in nature from 16 to 1 for all of time to 7 to 1. It's priced at, for 200 years, the average was 42 to 1. Now it's roughly 80 to 1. It has a massive expansion in industrial uses and a renaissance in monetary demand. It ticks every single box as a great investment. So, I think sometimes you have to trust your gut, have strong fingertips, hang on, and know that you're right, even though people around you will make you feel like you're not. Yeah. I think 2023 will be a year where us metal people are going to, and it's inappropriate for me to say vindicated, but we will be vindicated. I think we will be proven correct. And it's not something that I think most of us will take pride in.
Right.
In being correct in an environment, perhaps when everyone around us is suffering.
That's
and that's the bad part about it.
Yeah. And even going back to the gold to silver ratio, it used to be 2.5 parts silver equals 1 part gold, like 2.5 back in like ancient biblical times. Because back then they thought silver was literally magical because silver responds to other elements like no other metal does, and it has antimicrobial properties. It purifies water. Drop silver in water, purifies it. Drop it in milk, it keeps the milk fresh longer. Like they thought it was, and it is. I mean, silver's not like anything, the most highly conductive metal for thermal conductivity, electricity. And it wasn't till 1930. It was 16 to 1 for thousands of years. 1930, FDR gets in office, changes it from 16 to 1 to 75 to 1 in 1930. Single-handedly just manipulated. It's a man-made ratio, and it will go back down. Now, I don't know if it's going to be 8 to 1 or 4 to 1 or 16 to 1, but regardless, we know that ratio is extremely out of whack, and it will go back down. It's funny that people need to see the price go up for them to feel validated as it's green. Agree. We have to get in before the curve, just like Bitcoin. I was telling people to buy Bitcoin at $1,200. They called me crazy, but then they're all buying it at $20,000, and that's when I'm selling it. And it's crazy that people. I always tell people, when most people are buying, you should be selling. When most people are selling, you should be buying. Just do the exact opposite of everyone, because we know we know. We see past the price, and a lot of people, they look at the price. That's gambling. Investors make strategic decisions based off information. We take that information, tweak the odds in our favor, while gamblers have the odds highly against them. And if you look at the information, it's blatantly obvious, regardless of the price. And I hate that I still have doubters on my channel. Like this one guy said, silver isn't money. It just said silver isn't money. I said silver's been money before our dollars were money, and the only reason that a dollar was considered money is so you didn't have to exchange the metal, and then we got rid of the metal, and now we have these worthless pieces of paper. Like, how could you say that silver isn't money? It's God's money. So is gold. And it's funny that and these are the type of people that I feel bad for, because if you don't know that you don't know, it's okay. Like the people that are walking around oblivious of the how beneficial gold and silver are, those people, they didn't even have a chance to make the decision. But the people that know about gold and silver and still don't, those are the ones that are going to be kicking themselves in the butt. Like the people that knew about Bitcoin back when it was, $5 that didn't jump on it. Those are the ones that probably feel the worst. But yeah, just it's crazy.
I talk to a lot of people. I do a lot of interviews, and you seem to have as good of a grasp of what's happening and the history as anyone I talk to. And you've done as much for the industry as anybody out there. You've been doing this for years. And, people come on, there's always going to be people who come on and listen to a silver channel and then give you shit. Silver's not money. Well, I mean, do a little research, you'll find that silver truly is money, going all the way back to biblical times, and fits the definition of money. Look at Aristotle's I think there's six classifications for what defines money. Now, I don't remember them all, but you'll see that the dollars that we call money, or actually currency, does not fit the definition of what money really is.
Yeah.
Gold and silver do. Gold and silver are money and have been money for most of human civilization. It's just a recent phenomenon when the central banks figured out a way to keep gold and silver out of the monetary picture to enrich them. Yeah. But everything goes full circle. And I think we are at the end of the era where, bankers do and politicians do what they have done since Roman times. They screw the pooch. They ruin a good thing by destroying the value of the currency. And I think this is why the full circle part is you see all of these countries accumulating gold. Like when you look at the Eastern European countries that are accumulating gold, Turkey and Hungary and Poland.
Didn't Russia last week just come out of nowhere? I think I remember seeing an article where they're like, Russia came out of sideline of them and just bought a whole bunch of gold recently.
Not only did they buy a whole bunch of gold, they just issued in conjunction with China, a new gold-backed digital asset, a digital convertible digital coin.
So is that it's on the block? Yeah. Okay. Stable coin. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And they're pegging it to gold. So, but these countries, many of them that are either in the European Union or have trade arrangements with the European Union, they all have their own currency. They don't trade the euro. They're all massively buying gold. They're going to break free and move away from this system, which is dying. And you can see by the drive to accumulate commodities that this is a chess game. And the most sophisticated money in the world is positioning themselves on the board. And it's just a matter of time before it all works itself out. Yeah, I think there's no question about it. This is happening. And then you look at what's going on here at home and people who think that everything is just going to be okay. There's an article that I want to talk about that really is kind of freaky. And it's the FDIC Systemic Resolution Advisory Committee. This is a committee that met in November to discuss the next market crash and what steps would need to be taken to ensure that not everyone pulls out their money at the same time. One FDIC member noted that while the banks and the institutions would soon be able to figure out the consequences and the implications of a financial collapse, the general public should not, because that would create and lead to unintended consequences. And he says that he says, and I'll read it here. It says, he claimed that although institutions will soon be able to figure out the dire implications of what's being discussed at the meeting, the general public should not, because that would lead to unintended consequences. I would be careful about the unintended consequences of starting to blast too much of this out to the general public. He said that another member said, although institutions don't want to see a huge run on deposits, they likely will soon, which will bring about the need to impose bail-ins. And then they say, People need to understand that they can get bailed in, but you don't want a huge run on the institutions, but there are going to be. And it could be an early warning signal to the FDIC and primary regulators when things happen, he said. This was a video that is out, like a 6-minute video. You can watch it. But I want people to understand one as it pertains to the money in the bank. When you talk about silver being money and gold being money and removing the risk of being in the system, right now, the reality is there's only $125 billion in FDIC backing 9 trillion in bank deposits. Let that sink in for a minute. 125 billion in FDIC backing 9 trillion. And here you have the Systemic Risk Committee of all names for the FDIC saying, shit's going to hit the fan. The public better not, we better not let this get out to the public because it will create a bank run.
Yeah.
And that's maybe why when you go to the bank, try to pull out $1,000 in $10 bills or whatever, they say, what do you need this for? They're trying to
don't even get me
stem the
started
tide
with
of
all that
bank
crap.
runs. This is further reason to believe that gold and silver are money, and what we have been told is money long after it's hanging from a frame in the Smithsonian of what used to be called money. Gold and silver will still be money, and these are the reasons to buy it. It's not just because of the BRICS nations, or it's not just because people are draining COMEX. What's happening here at home is very frightening. And when you see the FDIC come out and lie to the public, and it's lying by omission, saying the banks will know what's going on, but we can't let the people freak out because they're going to make a run on the banks. And even though that's going to happen soon, it needs to happen on its own. We can't precipitate that. And to further underscore the severity of the systemic risk of the banks, right now, the second largest bank in the world, Swiss Credit Bank, is about this close away from bankruptcy. They needed a $20 billion infusion from the Federal Reserve of the United States, is giving the second largest bank in the world in Switzerland $20 billion to keep going. And they just laid off 9,000 employees. So the second biggest bank in the world laid off 9,000 employees and took a $20 billion bailout, whatever you want to call it, from the Fed in another country. That should tell you the systemic nature of all of this. And that's why this FDIC systemic group is scared, because if one bank goes down in Switzerland, just happens to be the second biggest bank in the world, they're all tied together in derivatives. And that's why a company like AIG had to be bailed out in 2008, because they're the reinsurer of all of these stupid derivative contracts that are valued based upon a counterparty's ability to perform. Well, if the second biggest bank in the world goes bust, how does that make the derivatives that they're part of with God knows how many other banks? What's the value? Zero. And that's when they go to the reinsurance with a company like AIG. And if enough of this happens at once, bang, it all blows up. These are scary times that we find ourselves in. And this isn't about return on money. It's about return of it.
Yeah.
And
That's
when you
a good
see
way
these
to-
warning
yeah.
signs all around you, you have to wake up and realize this is real.
Yeah, we're not stacking silver and gold to get rich. It's what makes us rich, or not even rich, but wealthy, you know. And a very scary thing you also mentioned when we're talking about, you know, kind of sweeping this under the rug, is channels that do speak the truth on YouTube censorship. You know, I mean, we're the ones spreading the word. You know, we're the middleman that is connecting the truth to the people. So the best way to cut that off is silence us, you know. And that's something that's always kind of on my mind, is, you know, YouTube censorship, or them, they could easily just, you know, shut down my channel, just give me some BS strikes or whatever. I've actually seen another channel called Junius Maltby, another one of my favorite stacking channels, where he talks about just this is stuff we talk about, you know, exposing the truth. And he got like 2 strikes just out of the blue the other day, and he's talking about, I think they're trying to censor me. And that's a scary thought, you know. That's
Just about everyone I was on with in 2020 was censored. All of them, you know, all of them. In fact, a gal named Sarah Westall, who's awesome, I was on her show yesterday. She's off of YouTube altogether and is on other platforms, but actually had her GoDaddy stripped her IP shut down her website.
Wow.
So yeah, we live in a world where, we see that type of censoring where the FBI is involved in it, where people think it's okay to have a $30 trillion debt where 5 million people have come across the border illegally. I mean, everything is upside down in this country, and it's very concerning. And yet we still keep marching on like everything is going to be okay. And I think that these this great I don't even know what the hell you call where we are right now in time, but I just hope that, and I think there will be ramifications. I just hope that people like us are able to get to enough people to show them what's really happening to make a difference. Because the sad truth of it is that most people will be completely caught off guard by what's coming. They have
Yep.
no idea what's coming, and they're underprepared. Here again, ask yourself, why do we see these kinds of huge deliveries off of the exchanges if something isn't
Right. You
coming?
think
The
they're just
biggest money in the
randomly
world is
doing
front
that?
running it.
They're just randomly doing that,
Right.
like
That's the
they're,
point. Nothing is done just randomly
yeah,
anymore.
right. Especially from the top tier, most sophisticated, biggest, most powerful banks and people. There's a reason. And if there wasn't a reason, if it was more random, you would see it sporadically, but it's all happening. Like, it's too ironic to be ironic that, right now, if someone watched this video and was trying to like fill in, trying to figure out some type of conspiracy that we're making this up, or it's like it's crazy that I'm sure there are people that are doubtful or think that gold and silver aren't going to do crap, but those are the ones doesn't really matter, and that's what I try to tell people is if you think that $30 for an ounce of silver is too pricey, then I don't know what to tell you, because that means, one, you don't understand the true value of silver, and most importantly, you don't understand the true value of a dollar, because you'll see that, $35 too or silver will never hit $50 again. I see that one a lot. Silver
The
will
last
never
time
hit
the
50.
dollar was this strong, silver was $5 an ounce.
Yeah.
So
Like,
the dollar is holding up amazingly well in an environment where the dollar has been manipulated higher, and
yeah.
you don't have to apologize to anyone.
Yeah.
What you are doing is phenomenal. Everyone in this industry owes guys like you a debt of gratitude. It's a thankless job to do what you do, to get out here and I listen to your interviews. You don't talk about things that are not rooted in fact. It's okay
Right.
to say, I think this is what will happen based upon this set of facts. But the sad part about it is that there are a lot of people out there who won't even listen to a different school of thought, and
Yeah.
they are fully invested in stocks and bonds at a period of time where the bond market, the 10-year treasury last year was down 16%, the worst year ever in the history of the 10-year treasury, where the S&P was down over 20%, where gold and silver, which didn't perform that well at all in terms of dollars, although in other currencies, it was all-time highs. Gold was against the euro, up 12% against the pound. So gold and silver did real well in other currencies, but it's a situation where even in that environment, they outperformed everything: stocks, bonds, real estate, cryptos, everything. And when gold and silver really do accentuate themselves, be careful what you wish for. Yes, if you own enough, you might actually be wealthy in an environment where being wealthy won't be as exciting and fun as it
Yeah.
once was, right?
Yeah.
But that's what this is all about, not just surviving, but maybe even thriving. And there will be opportunities out there for people who have the ability to not be swept up in what's coming with the markets and with the dollar. That's why the biggest money in the world is taking possession and pulling it off of the exchanges. They want to remove any and all counterparty risk, want it in their possession, because I think the next trend globally will be legitimacy, will be transparency, will be real things like commodities. And
Yeah.
that's really what we're getting at here, is that it's gone past make believe now into, you got to show me, because there's been too much in the way of fraud and too much in the way of manipulation by the people whom we were told to trust. now it's going to boil down to, no, I want the real thing backing a system if we're going to ever trust it again. And that's really what's happening right now. So how does it all play out? Don't know. But when I see the FDIC saying there's going to be a run on the banks, and we need to be hush hush about it. When I see the second biggest bank in the world being bailed out by the Fed and it's not being talked about, when I see $320 million worth of gold being delivered in 2 days off the COMEX, these are all signs that fully support what you and I have been talking about now for several weeks.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap things up. We talked about a lot today. Really enjoyed this episode, and try to do this next week at around 2 or 3. Usually I'll
Yeah, I
post
think we
this,
should do it every week at
yeah,
this time. And
yeah.
by the way, we do have a special right now on assorted 10-ounce silver bars at $2.25 over the price of
Oh,
silver.
nice.
So if people write into info@milesfranklin, put the Slayer sent me, we'll make sure that they get personalized service, and we will do our very best to make it the
Yeah.
best experience possible.
That's a
And for
great
what
deal. I'm
it's
gonna have to
worth, I
buy
appreciate you, brother.
that's a great deal. I love 10-ounce bar. I think I'm gonna have to go in on some of those bad boys.
Well, I got 5,000 of them I bought,
Wow.
and so they're in stock. So
Nice.
they're ready to go. And if your listeners want to get in touch, even with me, address it to me, info@milesfranklin. I will respond to every one of them, and I will make sure that your listeners are treated the way that you would expect. So it's an honor to work with you, and look forward to doing it for the rest of this year and see what this crazy year throws at us. I have a feeling that every week there's going to be a lot to talk about, even a week like this week where not a lot happened, yet there's a lot to talk about.
That's a good point. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like the video, then please like the video, share the video, comment. Engagement really does help. And make sure you subscribe, as we're on the road to 100,000 subscribers. Thanks for tuning in. This was Silver Slayer. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.